Upper 30, the clive Labour Party Parliament candidate for Norwich South in the 2015 UK Parliament elections, came to our university. I have a chance to interview him. When I asked him what will be changed in Norwich when he elected, he said,
"Well, if I'm elected, and clearly I take nothing for granted, the first thing that will change is that we will have a Labour MP in this city. And I think for the last 5 years we've had two MPs, one in Norwich North and one in Norwich South, who have both been partners in a coalition government, a government that I think has been the most right-wing government we have seen in this country, more right-wing in many ways than Margaret Thatcher. So the first thing is, once again, the working people of this city will have a real voice, a voice in Parliament, a voice to represent them, and someone I think who will do their best to stand up and speak unto power. And that's a big change, I think.
We talk about the great popularity among the young people and whether the young people really care about the politics.
I think we've worked very hard to reach out to students. I think most of the political parties are aware now, after what happened to the Lib Dems on their broken promises on tuition fees, are aware of how powerful the student vote can be. I think that most people, most students in particular, come into this world seeking to change the world and make it better. And they are progressives, natural progressives, and therefore they are naturally attracted to progressive parties. And I believe the Labour Party is and can be one of the most progressive forces in this country. So, we're working really hard for student votes here, hence I'm here today. And we take nothing for granted. But I hope they can. But when you dig down below the surface, if people say they don't care about politics, they do care about how much they're having to pay for their education. They do care about how much it costs to get from a bus to their home into university. They do care about will there be a decent job for them at the end of their course. They do care about the NHS and will they be able to get treatment free from a good public service. They do care about are there good public transport links to get them home from wherever they may be. So although they may not think they're party political, they do care about politics because politics is about our everyday lives. So in that sense, they do care. Okay, so what Labour have said on tuition fees is that two things here. There's what my party's saying, there's what I think. And I'm happy with our policy. It's a step in the right direction. What we've said is that the coalition government tripled tuition fees from £3,000 to £9,000. I think that's wrong. So does my party. So what we've said is that we will reduce tuition fees to £6,000. That should save the average student around about £10,000 for their degree course. We'll also ensure that the poorest students have an extra £400 a year for their maintenance grant. That's really important. But secondly, what we've said is universities are very concerned that reduction in the cap from 9,000 to 6,000 will mean a shortfall of perhaps £2 billion a year for their income from the student loan. So what we've said is that we will take the pension pots of the wealthiest pensioners, the ones who have the biggest pension pots, the wealthiest pension pots, and we will take tax relief. And that's the money that you take off on taxes on those pensions. We will take that money. We don't think it's fair that the bigger the pension pot you have, the less tax you pay. So we will take that tax relief off, and that £2 billion a year we will give to student funding to ensure that universities, which are the engines of progress in our economy and our country, are properly funded. That's a really important point. But look, the last point I'm going to make is this. Ultimately, around about half the students who take out a student loan don't pay it back. And I think there's a real question here about what kind of society and economy we want. And I want to see one where we don't put the burden of education on the youngest shoulders. And if we look at education simply as a transactional good, something which benefits the individual, then yes, okay, take out the loan, give them the loan. But if we see education as something which is a public good, so we are creating the doctors, the nurses, the historians, the engineers of tomorrow, then I think it's right that they pay, if they earn more, they pay more through progressive tax. But ultimately, we should be providing that education collectively. So I think that's really important. That's something that I will be pushing for if I'm elected.
He also pointed immigration policy is the key point in this election.
It is. It is a key point in this general election, and depends on who you speak to. If you speak to many of the poorest people in this constituency, they tell me they're concerned about immigration. When you dig below the surface, though, you find out that it's not about people from other countries. What they're concerned about is the fact that they can't get access to decent, affordable housing. They're worried that they won't be able to see a doctor for their children in time. They're worried about public services, worried about zero-hour contracts, worried about minimum wage and stability in their jobs. That's what they're concerned about. That's what we have to tackle. And parties like UKIP and the Tories are offering more of the same. They're not looking to solve those problems. They're looking to bash people who are coming to this country to make an economic contribution. Immigration has been fantastic for this country and can continue to be so. And I think that's a message that I will be shouting out loud and clear. Yeah, so what we've said as a party, and I'm in a little bit of a disagreement with my party on this, some of the things that we've said are about having controls on immigration, but all the parties are saying that, but it's the emphasis. We've also said that they would increase the time that people could actually claim benefits from the European Union from 6 months to 2 years. I think that's punitive. I think in the current climate, with UKIP doing relatively well in the polls, it sends out the wrong message. It kind of says to some people, actually, there is a problem with immigration, and maybe UKIP are right. I don't want to send out that message. Therefore, I think what we should be coming from, the starting point should always be immigration is good for this country. And look, we've got an ageing population. All of Europe does. We need young people in this country, young, dynamic immigrants who come here to start a new life. We need them, we want them, and we should be quite clear about that.
He gave us the forecast of the elections.
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I clearly don't know what the result is going to be. No one does. That's up to the electorate. They make the decision. I look at the data, the Hanratty UEA Newsnight data, and it says that we're doing quite well. We're ahead. It's a week away. Anything can happen. But I would say to people, ultimately, there will be one of only two governments, either a Tory or a Labour government. If you want a Labour government, vote Labour. Simple as that. Don't take any chances. And you'll also be getting a candidate and an MP who will be, I think, someone who will speak to the values of many young people in this university and this country. And I'm hopeful that we can be successful.
When we talk about the relations between the journalists and the parties, he said,
I think there is an unhealthy relationship between big business and the establishment in this country and the media. That even stretches to the BBC. And whilst the BBC may be immune from the financial arrangements of big corporations, it isn't immune from the influence that they have on setting the agenda. So I look at people like Rupert Murdoch and some of the wealthiest people on the planet, and the disproportionate influence these individuals have on the discussion and debates that people have and the news that people take in and what they consider to be the news and what is reality and what is acceptable, what is orthodox and what isn't. And the BBC responds to that in many ways sometimes, and it sets the frame for the debate. And at the moment, that debate economically is all about the deficit. I don't think that is the key issue for most people. I think it's a red herring in many ways. I think there is an unhealthy relationship and between big business and some politicians and political parties and the media. And we have said as a party that we want to see a reform of our newspapers so that they are more democratically accountable, so that they are held to account. I think that's important because if you consider the media as the fourth estate, as it's sometimes termed, its job surely is to hold power to account. There are people like John Pilger that are really disappointed with the way that so many journalists and journalistic organisations aren't holding power to account, and they're getting away with quite literally murder sometimes. I think that has to stop, and we have to reassess what it is the media does and how we make sure we have a fair, effective media that looks at the full gambit of the political spectrum and ideas and isn't afraid to look at new ways of doing things, isn't simply stuck in the orthodoxy and the frames that have been set by the establishment. I think that's really important. I've obviously crossed over from journalism into politics because I was getting frustrated. Now I'm in politics. Let's see if I remain frustrated. Hopefully not.